So I have an issue. It is 2 days after the election, well, after the end of the election day. Elections historically have gone on through November and December, because the electoral won't vote until December, so we're still counting votes, and I'm seeing so much misinformation. It is really pissing me off. Also, I'm in a new apartment, so this is why it looks like this. I think it looks nice. I don't know. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. We knew, well, political pundits knew that there was going to be a red shift in some states and a blue shift in other states. What this means is, in states like Nevada and Arizona, they are able to count, they have laws in place that count mailed-in ballots first and voted early ballots first. That's what they do in Arizona and Nevada, for example. But in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, they're the opposite. They cannot open mailed-in ballots until Election Day. So Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin will count all in-person ballots on Election Day. And then they will begin to open all of the mailed-in ballots. And because there was a pandemic that has killed almost 250,000 Americans, most people voted from home. A lot of people voted in the mail. And for all this talk about mail-in voting being such a tragedy and being something that's negative and should be stopped, it's pretty stupid. Because it's enshrined in the Constitution as people have the ability to vote absentee if the state allows it. I know the state of Indiana I used to live in, you had to have a pretty valid information to vote absentee, or else they expect you to show up on polling day. I think it's gotten a little looser because of COVID, and you could include COVID as one reason why you wanted to vote by mail in many states. I voted early. Where I live now, North Carolina, it allowed me to vote early, so I just voted early. But the mail-in ballots, especially in Nevada and Arizona, why we're watching those races so closely, is because the mailed-in ballots were opened first. So it looked like Biden had a massive lead, and then Trump started catching up. Because they were then counting the in-person ballots that were filled out. But in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they're opening the mailed-in ballots now. And in Georgia, they're opening the mailed-in ballots now. I know in North Carolina, we're still waiting because as long as your vote by mail was stamped for Election Day, not today, but for Election Day, then you will be able to, your vote will be counted. But I think it has to be in through Friday. It has to be in by Friday. But with mail being such a fucking clusterfuck this year, because Trump decided to attack the Postal Service because he wanted to attack mail voting, or mailed-in ballots, it's led to massive delays. So people complaining about this blue shift that we're seeing in, 5 states right now? Donald Trump made it this way. So stop complaining and stop saying that there's mass voter fraud. Because there is no mass voter fraud. I just got another notification because I'm trying to convince somebody on Facebook that there is no mass voter fraud, and our comment string is probably about 150 comments long by now. I'm not going to let this die. This is the hill I will die on. There is no evidence of voter fraud at any point, at any time, in this country over 250 years. When people get caught with voter fraud, they go to prison and their vote gets thrown out. Like, there is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percentage of votes that come back as fraudulent. Sometimes it's because when you mailed in your ballot, your signature didn't quite match up. Or maybe you changed your address and your mailed in ballot doesn't match your new address, so they get rid of your ballot. I don't know about that second circumstance, but I know the first one happens. If your signature doesn't match on your mailed-in ballot that what the state has on file, then I guess like your ballot's just gone. We don't know. it's just gone. We're gonna destroy it because your signature doesn't match. It's so ridiculous. So there is no mass voter fraud. Whenever you see anyone saying that there is voter fraud, they are wrong. Period. And this discussion that we're having on this long ass Facebook post is that it originally started with the president tweeting that there is voter fraud, and I said, no, there's absolutely no evidence that there is mass voter fraud anywhere in this country. And people are saying that there needs to be an investigation of voter fraud. And I was like, no, there doesn't, because there's poll watchers who are hired to watch the polls to make sure that all of these are counted correctly and that there is no voter fraud. So there's already people in place by the state, by local governments, to watch people count these votes. And since these votes are already being watched, we don't need an investigation because they're not seeing any mass voter fraud. And people keep stating that because there is a question that there might be voter fraud. Yeah, like there's a question we may be living in the fourth dimension, but people aren't really researching that right now. Like there's questions like if the earth is flat. But if you go to Google, which is another argument we're having, if you go to Google and look up, is the earth flat, you're going to find thousands upon, probably millions at this point, of articles and sources saying, no, the earth is round. So when you Google, is there mass voter fraud, and you're finding thousands upon millions, possibly, of articles and sources saying that there is no voter fraud, then there is no voter fraud. And I guess people don't really understand that Google isn't biased. You just type in anything and it just browses all corners of the internet to bring any matches that the words that you search for will bring. It'll bring top matches, it'll bring sponsored matches, whatever. But it'll bring matches. So if you look through enough of those sources, you will not find any credible source that says there is mass voter fraud. Because there isn't. And for these like people saying that they found ballots. They didn't find ballots, they're counting them. That's like saying you're counting to the number 10 and you found the number 7. No, you were gonna get there anyway. A lot of people are questioning like, oh, all of these ballots are going for Biden. Maybe. But it's like, maybe, we don't know. They probably separated them. Like, all of these went for Biden, all of these went for Trump. And one person saw that all of these went for Biden and ignored the fact that all of these other mailed-in ballots went to Trump. So they're just saying, oh, they found all of these ballots and they all went for Biden. But they're ignoring that I believe it's around 40% of all mailed-in ballots go to Trump and 60% go to Biden. So they're ignoring the 40% and saying the 60%, we need to look at this, there's massive voter fraud everywhere. No, there's no voter fraud. Don't let people spread these lies, because when people are spreading lies that there's mass voter fraud, you know who likes that? Putin, President Xi, Kim Jong-un, because then they can point to the American democracy system and saying, look at all of this fraud, look at all this infighting over the potential of voter fraud. That is why democracy doesn't work, and that is why our governments work. That is what those three countries want. Russia wants to undermine American democracy and keep the powers at be in charge in Russia. President Xi wants to undermine the American democracy so his Communist Party can stay in power in China. Kim Jong-un wants to undermine American democracy so he can prove to his people that Americans are just dogs and they don't know how to run a country. And and the North Koreans should stick with the Kim family. Like, that's what these three countries want. They want to find any cracks that they can in the American electoral system to solidify their power in their respective countries. The American election is viewed around the world. And when the president tweets that there is mass voter fraud, even though there was no evidence of there being any mass voter fraud, it undermines the election process in this country. He is undermining his own country by saying there's voter fraud. And the only person that really benefits is Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un. That's what he's doing. He's helping out his friends in China, North Korea, and Russia by saying there's mass voter fraud in the election, even though there is no mass voter fraud. Don't believe everything you see. And just because Google looks like it's a biased source, it is not. If you really want to see if Google's a biased source, click on 10 articles. The first 10 articles you find, as long as they're not sponsored. But click on the first 10 articles you find, and then find the sources inside of those articles, and then keep finding those sources. Keep backtracking from the article and finding the sources that make the base of the article. If you are really questioning whether or not there is mass voter fraud, find primary sources. Find people who are there. Find people who are poll watchers. Find people who are counting the vote actively. Because they will tell you there is no voter fraud. I think I saw the BBC saying that there was 0.000009% of voter fraud cases in the United States. That is so tiny. It is meaningless. And yet Trump and his base are saying that is mass voter fraud, even though they're going to ignore the fact that COVID has like a 4% death rate. We're just going to ignore that. We're going to ignore that 4% and focus on this percentage of a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. That makes no sense to me. Anyway, I'm going to go because my voice hurts. And I need to actually prove to people that there is no mass voter fraud. I really wanted to make this video because I'm very frustrated. Okay, bye.